Hi, this is Andy with Tradeparency. I wanted to spend a few minutes today going over who we are and what we do, so I appreciate you spending a little time with me, and I'll jump right in. So we were founded in 2017. We are a pricing and promotions processing solution for the three-tier beverage alcohol industry with an emphasis in wine. We were actually spun off from a company, Business Impact, which is a data warehousing and reporting and analysis company. We found that there was a need in the market to collect this invoice level expense data by distributor to provide our clients with some insights into where their investments are going in the three-tier market. So Tradeparency came to be. So at Tradeparency, we try to focus on four core problems that we've tried to address. The first one being price grid maintenance is always a challenge. Usually this was done in Excel, so you have a lot of Excel headaches. You have different versions for different salespeople, for different distributors. Some distributors might share the same style, but you're still trying to manage them all in a very disparate way, and getting them organized in a centralized location can be a bit of a challenge. The age-old finance versus sales versus IT question. Finance a lot of times doesn't know what sales is doing, and sales doesn't necessarily know what finance is doing. And IT is kind of stuck in the middle somewhere trying to find a solution that will make both parties happy. It comes to the question of, who owns the pricing and where's the one source of truth. And so having the disparate systems around makes it challenging for everybody to be on the same page. And then the how much am I spending by the glass? That's a question we get quite often. By the glass programs tend to be the most expensive for a supplier, so they want to know where that money's going and making sure that investment's actually driving the lift they're hoping it does, or driving the adoption in the restaurants. And also, are restaurants the only ones buying that by the glass program? So that's always a good question that we try to answer. And then overall spending, visibility to the total spend, not just depletion allowances, but also your incentives and your samples and wine list printings and et cetera. Whereas all the other spend that we want to be able to see, the visibility to the entire spend, and not just at the distributor level, but nationwide, covering the 100% of the market. I want to know exactly what my blended spends are across the entire country. So those are kind of the areas we like to focus on, and Tradeparency we call a closed loop solution. So I'll go ahead and explain what we mean by that. You have to start with the pricing here at the very top of the wheel. Pricing and gathering your price grids into one centralized location is key to be able to do anything else. And then how do you process your claims against those price grids, claims or process your invoices against those price grids, and how does it relate? And then how do we integrate that with an accounting system? We don't want to create more work for accounting, so we integrate to the existing technology that's in place. We want to make sure we're pushing those invoices to an existing accounting system. And then you want to analyze that information. Once you've processed all those bill backs, you want to know where it's going and who's buying at that price point, and how much you're investing in these different programs to make sure they're driving the lift or the programs that you want to have driven. And then how do you plan accordingly? Your annual planning process is hinging on understanding the insights that you've gained from these investments you've made in the distributor network to make sure that the investments are paying off. So without boring you any further with PowerPoint, I'll go ahead and jump right over into Tradeparency. So this is the Tradeparency homepage. And on this homepage, there's a few different things to look at. Down here in these lower four quadrants, this is kind of giving a high-level view into your spend by a couple different buckets. We've got your spend by your brand varietal combinations, spending per case by state. You can kind of hover over and see what you're spending by state. Spending per month. We're in year 3 or month 3 of our demo data here. So we've got a couple of months of spending data here, so you can see it by month. And then you also have spending per case by your discount brackets. And what we mean that is your discount off of frontline or discount off list price. So those different buckets of discounts. So this gives you just a very high level view into where your spend is year to date, just to get some visual indicators for you. So these two bars here, I'll explain a little bit deeper as I go along here, but this top one is our deal approval bar. We have the capabilities to set approvals in the system, so that if a deal gets added into the system, we can set rules to define how those get added to make sure that there's some layer of management into how deals get added to the system. I'll explain that a little bit later. And then also this invoice bar here. This is we call these invoice statuses, and these are custom. They're set to fit your individual organization's workflow. And this will tell us how many invoices are sitting in the different statuses. And as when I get into invoicing a little bit later, I'll explain what these mean. So I'll go jump into our deal grid. So this is our version of the price grid. You've got your distributor and brand and varietal information. You have your price to retail and your DA amounts and your start date and end dates here. We can either pulse or use a calendar. So you're probably familiar with looking at a price grid that's something like this, some version of this. These tend to be pretty spread out across the country, but they typically have the same information. You have your price to retail, you've got your DA amounts or your spending amounts, you have your percent of business, which is basically an indication of how much you're hoping to deplete at these different deal levels, and how those all kind of match up into a blended margin or some sort of revenue information. You would have a certain different tab for every item that you sell at that distributor. You might have 25 different versions of something like this, and it's all in disparate spreadsheets. So what we've done is we've combined that all into one master online database. And if you look at each individual deal, you have all the same information. You have the deal description, which explains to us what this deal is. You have your distributor and product info. You've got your list price and FOB information here, your frontline price or list price, whichever you call it. Up here on the top right, we have our date ranges. And when we talk about dates in Tradeparency, it drives a lot in the invoice process. We want to make sure that we're only paying on deals that are active during a certain time period. So this date range and or pulse date option here is critical when we actually get into the invoicing piece in a little bit. And then we have these deal types. These are a custom group that you can set up based on how you segment your deals. What we found is a lot of our clients are using this to segment their national account pricing. That's a very common issue that there is across the sales teams. When you have a national account team, it's difficult for them to understand national pricing across multiple distributors. And so this gives the regional sales managers the opportunity to come in here, check a box to show which account or which deals are your actual national account deals. So your national account managers can come in here and download a grid based on that feature. Percent of business, this one happens to be blank, but this is where you're setting up your planned percent that you're hoping to sell at this price point. Your laid-in cost, which factors in your freight and tax. Price to retail, which is your deal price to retail, and your bottle cost. And then you've got your DA dollar amount and a suggested shelf price here. Down along the bottom, we've got a few percentages just as calculations to show the percent off FOB and list price. And then we have your distributor margin on this deal and retail margin. Those are important metrics when you're setting up pricing with the distributor. They always like to talk about their margins and the retailer margins. And we also have supplier margin, which is optional. If you chose to put your costs in the system, we're able to consume that, so you can actually see what your margin is across each of these deals. This deal calculator button here, there's a few different ways to add deals in Tradeparency. I'm not going to get into that at this moment. We do have another video explaining the different methods to adding deals to the system. I just wanted to show that basically the same information that's on your old price grid is now housed in this deal screen, as well as this deal collection here, this distributor price grid now. We also do offer a report that is similar to what people are familiar with looking at. So I'm just going to pull up our friends in Arizona here, and I've already downloaded it to save a little time. So this is the new version of the price grid that's available in Tradeparency. We're able to download this to create an offline price grid that the sales team can now use to either email to a distributor, share with other sales team members, and it gives them a spreadsheet. We didn't want to completely change the way they like to manage their pricing. So we give them this as an opportunity. They can take this offline and they can do modeling in here if they want to, and they can kind of play around with their pricing in a spreadsheet environment that doesn't affect the online Tradeparency database. So it gives them that capability to still kind of live in a world that they're familiar with. So we're trying not to change too much at once. So this is I did mention earlier, I wanted to bring up the deal approvals. We do have some rules around approvals that you can set up. We have 4 different ways that you can set approvals up in the system. You can either use percent off of FOB, percent off price to retailer, which would be your list price, DA or SPA hard dollar amount, or your distributor gross margin. So in this case, we set it up to be a hard dollar amount, and you can set your users up based on what their role is in the organization, if they require approval or not. And then those deals have to go for approval, and they'll show up here on the home screen if there is any deals that need to be approved. So that kind of tackles the first piece of our wheel that I brought up earlier, the closed loop, the price grid maintenance. This is a centralized price grid now. You're able to manage all the pricing in one place. Everybody has access to this. Finance and sales can all come here to understand what pricing is across the country. And it kind of gives you that ability to use that as a price grid. So the next piece is, how does this relate to my invoicing, and how do we drive that? So I'm going to pull up again our friends in Arizona. And so along the left-hand side here, when you go to process invoices, you've got the months listed on the left. And this month is the actual month that the depletion occurred. You want to make sure that we're applying the spend to the month of the activity in the market. So when you're doing an analysis later, I want to know what I spent the money on during that time period when I'm looking at depletions, not necessarily when the bill got paid. I'm sure you can relate across the board here that sometimes bills come late. You might be 90 days or 6 months behind on billing for various reasons. The distributor might be a little slow, The sales rep might have the invoice on their desk and just haven't had an office day yet to process. So we want to make sure that we're capturing that spend in the month that it occurred. So we apply it to the actual month of the depletion. It's very important. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up an invoice here that I started just for these demo purposes. So what I'm doing here is I'm pulling up the deals that are active during that time period, and I'm applying the case volumes from the bill from the distributor to those price points. So I've got these different deals that were active, and 15 cases went out at this deal, 10 cases went out at this deal. And here you can see this by the glass. When I get to my example a little earlier, you can see how many cases went out at this deal here. And we're capturing those case quantities right here in Tradeparency to be able to push that invoice through to accounting later. And I mentioned earlier that we don't just focus on depletion allowances. We care about other expenses as well. So here in this example, we've got some incentives, some samples, and wine list printings that we're being billed for. And this list is customizable based on your GL, and you can set as many expense types as you want to start capturing that level of grain on your other expenses, not just your depletion allowances. And we might require just brand for these things, or you can require brand and varietal. For example, samples. I want to know exactly the bottle that was pulled from the sample, so we require varietal on this one. But this gives us the capability to capture all that spend on the other things down to that granular level to give us a better picture into what's going on. And I mentioned earlier too that we cover 100% market coverage. We don't necessarily have to have access to depletion with pricing information to be able to look at the pricing data. We manage grids for every distributor, so we do 100% of your distributor billbacks through Tradeparency. And as I mentioned earlier, not just DEAs, but other expenses as well across the entire country. So all of your billbacks are processed through Tradeparency. Earlier, I talked about these invoice statuses. These are live buttons, and these are customizable to fit your organization structure, whatever your workflow is. So in this case, I have this sitting and ready for sales approval. If I'm a sales rep and I had to come in here and verify that this bill is ready to go, I do my work to make sure everything looks good, and I'm able to go ahead and move that where I need to move it in the system. This was something that was typically done manually. You would have some version of a price grid in Excel typically, and you would get a bill from the distributor, and you'd manually go through each line and match that to a price grid offline. And you'd trust that everything matched properly, and you would trust that whoever was doing that process is checking it with a fine-tooth comb. What we've done here is we've actually created this trust but verify method where the deals here are actual deals that are in the system that have been approved from your approval process, and you're able to actually tie these cases directly to the deals that are in the system without doing everything offline and then paying the bill later. So when this bill is ready to go, I'm going to go ahead as an accounting person, I'm going to submit this to the accounting system. And when I do that, the integration that we have with the accounting systems, the accounting system will go out and pull the invoices from Tradeparency and enter them into the accounting system like normal. We really didn't want to create more work for the accounting team. So we want to leverage the technology that's already there. So they've got the invoices coming straight from here. The data collection is happening on this side, and the invoice is getting created in your accounting system as usual, or a credit memo. If you use credit memos, we have that as an option as well. So that's kind of the collection of the invoice side and how it relates back to the price grid. So as we go through our loop here, we've got our price grid maintenance, which check that box. We've got our invoice claims and how we're processing those and how we integrate that with accounting. So you can check those two boxes. And so ultimately, why are we doing all this? What are we hoping to gain by doing all this activity? So I'm going to jump over here to Target. So Business Impact is partnered with a company called Target, which is a reporting tool. And we basically put that on the top of our data warehouse. And within a data warehouse, you might have multiple different data sources. So in this example, we have shipments and revenue, which would be coming from your ERP or accounting system. We've got direct sales revenue here, which would be a consumer direct system. Third-party system. We have depletion information over here, which would come from another third-party company if you have depletion collection. And then down here on the lower right, we have Tradeparency data. So we have our DA and spend data down here on the lower right. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. That'll pop open a second view here. So now I'm able to see, I'm going to tie this spend to my depletion data from a third party. And I'm able to see my rate per case across my portfolio. I'm able to see it across every state in the country, and I can see kind of a heat map here of where it's showing me where my spend is. And then over time, so I can see how my spend relates to my depletion data to make sure that my investments are actually driving the business I want it to drive. So I can click on a certain state here, and it'll just pull up that state's information. I pick Nevada. It shows me all the products in Nevada and how those all relate to each other. So that's just kind of a high-level idea of where our investments are going. One thing we can also do is start to plan for accruals. So finance teams like this feature where we can look at the historical spend and we can assume this is what we're going to spend because we've done that over a significant amount of time. we look at the shipments over the past month, and we can kind of come up with an accrual for our DAs and other expenses based on what we've done in the past. So it kind of gives at least a little more intelligence to the accrual process as opposed to just waiting for invoices to come. As I mentioned before, sometimes they're months behind. This gives you a way to at least calculate out what you assume you're going to be spending over time. One other thing we can do is go actually dive down to the distributor level and see by distributor here, by product. I'm seeing a running theme here. Here's all of our products at this one distributor. Here's our months that you can select a certain month. And now here's all the deals that have been billed against. I can see how many cases have gone out at each deal. I can see how much the total spend is on each deal. So when we had that question of how much am I spending by the glass, I can look at all my by the glass deals in here and find out how much they're costing me and see if it's really getting the lift that I want to get and see how it relates back to my depletions. Am I truly depleting what I want? And if you have access to retail level depletion data, you can see the price points in the market. You can start to see which accounts are actually buying at that price point. And it kind of gives you that deep level of insights, and it gives you, you start to get a taste of what's available by using this information to make decisions and potentially partner with your distributor a little better and provide them better insights into where you would like your investments going. And so that's just a bit of what we've done with this information. The sky's the limit with it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to my PowerPoint to close this out. So as I talked about this closed loop, we have the price grid maintenance, which we can check that, the claims and the integration with the accounting system. And then our analysis is you can do just about anything you want, understanding where those investments are going. You can start to optimize your spend based on that analysis, not only saving money where there's deals that you're not making, that don't make much sense, but also where you have good business practices happening. You want to make sure that you're able to provide better volume in those areas to get a better return on your investment. So, and then how do you plan? How do you use that info to do your annual planning? And it provides that next layer of insights into creating better business decisions going forward. So in closing, I'll go ahead and ask you to please visit our website, www.tradeparency.com. My name is Andrew Ridling. I'm the product manager, and then Nicole Luer is our VP of operations. You can contact either one of us at any time with any questions, or if you have any other questions or would like to request a deeper demo into Tradeparency. We have a couple of other videos on our site kind of explaining what we do as well. We are going to be kicking off a webinar series soon, focusing on some more in-depth topics within Tradeparency. A couple examples would be national account pricing management, invoice automation, and amongst some other topics that we've got on the docket. So please stay tuned, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Thank you very much.